And you're very welcome to the Racing Room with AK Bets, as rumours abound that Frankie Dettori has gone down on one knee to propose to Denise Coates in the hopes of getting jointly assessed for his tax. Little problem over the last couple of years. I don't know if that's going to work, but nevertheless, worth a try, isn't it? Tony Calvin, Harry Stewart Moore, Anthony AK Bets Kaminskas are with me as always. How are you doing, guys? All good?
Very well, thanks.
All good, thank you.
A little bit later than advertised. How was your week trading wise, AK? Getting towards the business end of the NFL, your favourite sport. I know obviously we mentioned the Flutter story as well about they've taken a lot of hits, and you mentioned why they wouldn't be too unhappy about that. But how was your week overall?
Yeah, all good. Just a standard enough week. Yeah, it was fine. NFL wise, probably the worst possible final for us. I'd imagine we were laying. Is it the Eagles?
Yeah,
those are what I know. We were laying them, and we laid a good bit of the Chiefs to win. Let me get my terminology right. To win the conference.
Yeah.
And then to win the Super Bowl as well. So it's the two biggest losers in the book, and we laid conferences as well. So a bit of a disaster. I actually messaged the lads on the WhatsApp group on Sunday night. I was watching GAA highlights. You'd be glad to know.
Were you really? Yeah, first round of the Allianz National League, was it?
But there's some kind of rule change, isn't there, for 2 points?
Yeah, there's loads of them.
I was watching that, and just to see how that affected how many people were going for it, just for my own interest. And I put it on the WhatsApp group at work, and the lads were like, "Okay, the NFL's on. It's whatever games it is."
Yeah.
And I was like, that shows you how low the NFL is down my pecking order. I'm watching.
Yeah, you'd rather watch Gaelic games. The Englishman would rather switch on Gaelic games and new rules rather than watch the NFL. Well, Jesus, there you go. I've backed the Buffalo Bills, by the way, to win the Super Bowl every year for the last 8 years, except for this year. So you know what's going to happen. They're playing the Chiefs, and they're going to win, and all of the way they go. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it, to be honest with you. Okay, we've lots to talk about on the show today. Let's just mention Denise Coates. Harry, herself and Fred Dunn, I think between them have quite a hefty tax bill, which I think they're pretty proud about. Would I read that right?
I don't know what that. I don't have any. Well, like most people, I'm not able to speak to either of them. But I said something on Twitter over the week, just saying that I'm not sure. Well, it's great they're paying lots of tax, and the government needs revenue. Whether it's the greatest look for the sport for two well-known owners of very large bookmaking outfits who run their businesses largely offshore to be amongst the top tax earners. I personally do not have an issue with it at all, but I think that bearing in mind that this is all a battle for hearts and minds ultimately, it's probably not worth crowing about, perhaps.
Definitely not. No, I want to be on it. Get me on it. It's not
You're going to have to get some better people on your podcast, AK, if you want to start making that kind of money.
Yeah, look, I don't know. It's not a bad thing necessarily, AK, is it? I mean,
I don't think so. Like, listen, I'm sick to death of perception. I don't care about perception.
Yeah.
Is that what you were eating throughout the podcast last week?
Yeah.
You got a bit of stick for you got a bit of stick for stuffing your face during the podcast.
I bloody told Abdul I wanted the food ready for 8:30, and it didn't materialize. So listen, I was starving. What can I say? I've eaten. You'd be glad to know chicken.
You're all set and ready to go.
I was so paranoid about this. I've had to transfer my gin and tonic to an Evian bottle.
There you go. Speaking of comments, one from 2 weeks ago, which I didn't bring up last week on the pod. One of the guys said, I used to hate Hugh, Cal, but I've actually kind of warned him. And I'm just wondering, for our listener, if you're still listening, what was it about me that drove you to hatred? Hate is such a strong word. So if you could tell me, I'll work on those little inefficiencies of mine, and you'll be doing me a favor. Just leave the comments under YouTube and I'll pick it up. Right, let's kick on, shall we, guys? Bit of a racing review to start off with, TC. And look, I suppose it's as much for the performances of the weekend. Constitution Hill did his thing, a bit of a stumble at the last. But he got the job done. I don't know what we can take from that. But I guess it was more from horses who didn't necessarily perform or didn't win. Iroko in the colours of JP McManus and Delta Work as well, who didn't run any kind of race TC, and people were kind of scratching their head, and this had led to the stewards getting involved.
Yeah, very good interview from Lydia Hislop with Sean Parker, who's of the BHA stewards. There was two horses they looked into primarily on Saturday at Cheltenham. Iroko, who finished fourth in the handicap chase there, and Delta Work in the Cotswold chase. They both, and I applaud this because they actually went into this. They actually asked questions of the participants. They published the results. Iroko in particular was a big casing point because Iroko has been long hailed as a Grand National hope for April. Obviously, the weights for that aren't out to mid-February. So that horse has been monitored by various people in the lead up to this, and he was given a very easy ride to finish fourth at Cheltenham on Saturday. That led to analysis of the ride itself. I just think that the whole circus around Iroko has been very, very curious because everyone's it was a big drifter on Saturday.
Yeah.
People say it ran accordingly, but it's been weirdly campaigned. But, people were just saying, oh, if you back that horse, you knew you were getting. They're running with an eye to entry in April, but they're ignoring the fact that this horse went off at 11-8 in a hotly contested Ascot graduation chase before that against 155 rated horses. So I don't know. I don't know how they're campaigning that horse, but obviously there were questions to be asked about that horse. They were asked. But most people were directed to the fact that the BHA only noted the explanations given by connections, and I think Harry's got a question to answer on that a bit later on. But yeah, there was that. That was a contentious issue. Delta Work was obviously called in about that one's ride in the Cotswold Chase again, with a view to the cross country chase at Cheltenham and maybe the Grand National as well. Yeah, it was a weekend where there was a lot of
Head scratchers.
not really. I mean, people were banding around the not off and non-triers and stuff like that, and people just saying, well, if you're backing those horses, you know you're getting. It's very, very Langadan territory.
It is.
I just think people just saying, is the BHA calling people in, accepting their explanations and noting them for future reference? Is that enough?
Yeah.
I don't think it is. And in that Lydia Hislop interview, there is an elongated 4-minute interview out there as well on YouTube or on the racing TV channels.
Yeah.
They also alluded to the fact that maybe the handicappers can take into those runs into account when they're assessing future handicap drops or rises. And again, this is a point that really, really kind of like bothers me because there was a run from Evan Williams's Ansam a couple of weeks ago where the horse was given a patently tender ride, and the handicapper rewarded him with a £2 drop. Now, that goes against what Sean Parker, the BHA steward, was kind of like intimating against his interview with Lydia. So there's a lot of issues that come out of the weekend and not satisfactory.
Well, let's just deal with that question now while we're on it, if you don't mind. Gwyneth Racing says for Harry, what's the significance of noting an explanation of Steward's inquiry for all? Are the rules of non-triers too lenient? Fine, but not sufficiently enforced. Fine, and generally well enforced. Like, what's your take on this?
You don't see noting nearly as much as you used to. I can't say, I don't read too many stewards' reports unless I really have to confess. But I had a quick look at the rules of racing, and there's not very much explanation of what noting means nowadays, because I used to understand it to mean that basically you were a bit suspect about a trainer's explanation and that you'd be watching them next time out, essentially. It was a bit of a shot across the bow. The rules of racing are pretty vague on it now. Just looking at it's the guidance to rules F, and it just says it's under a heading called other options. The following other options are open to the stewards. noting of all explanations. That's it, really, that I can see anyway. Perhaps, the rules aren't, they can be a bit all over the place, but that's all I can see. So at the moment, it's not particularly obvious to me nowadays what noting actually means. And it may be that it's just got sort of historic, it's almost symbolic, which is, okay, we're not going to go so far as to say that we think that you won trying or you hadn't given proper instructions. But we are going, we're not very impressed. But it doesn't look to me particularly obvious in terms of what happens in the future, what effect noting might have in the future, because there's other option, which is an adjourned inquiry, which is more information is required, which tends to be quite rare. And then you have one referral for review. It's not brilliant drafting this. Referral for viewing horses' previous runs. Then there are bullet points. Horse wins a handicap for classified stakes or related rating related maiden race without having previously placed in the first four, or a marked improvement in performance, or concerns are expressed about the performance last time out. So maybe a referral is what happens later if you've noted in the future. So in other words, if you're a bit worried about what happens, if you see dodgy betting or you see, dodgy betting. So look, they're not terribly clearly drafted. It's not very obvious. I mean, I think there's a danger of noting being a bit like the scene in, it's one of the Indiana Jones films where you've got the Bedouin guy with his sword, and he does all that, shaking it at Indiana Jones. And then Indiana Jones just pulls out the pistol and shoots him dead. I think noting might be a bit like the Bedouin guy with the sword, to be honest with you, in terms of its effect. Yeah. But look, maybe I'm wrong.
But obviously they have some stock in it, because otherwise they wouldn't say it. So like for the stewards, they must place some value on it was noted. So
yeah, absolutely, they must do. It's quite you just don't see nearly so often, frankly, as many non-trier charges as you used to. You just don't see it. I think they're very difficult to prove. They tend to be very controversial. And I think that the regulator tends to perhaps, shy away from ones unless they're pretty certain. Danny Brock would probably be the last one I can remember off the top of my head, and that was a relatively rare one.
I thought the noting was more common than that, to be honest with you, but I just maybe
I think it used to be. I mean, Tony would be the person to answer that as to whether there's been a change. I don't think you get it as much.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times, but what really kind of like I brought up the Ansam case because I was amazed that they didn't have a serious inquiry about that. There was Ascot 2 Saturdays ago, and everyone just thought, a front runner being held up out the back, given a very easy time of it. They won't do anything with a handicap mark because it was an obvious kind of like run to the future. And they actually rewarded it with a £2 drop, which I thought was staggering. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea of noting, I think it's a kind of like an easy get out clause now for them.
Yeah. I think also it's just interesting, just an observation when you're reading those rules out there, how important they're still placing on finishing the first four, as if like at that arbitrary line, like field sizes are getting smaller. Shape of races, you can have 8 runners and you can have 4,000 to 1 shots. Like the first 4 part seems very
and you
specific
can
and not very relevant.
And you can be betting to finish in the first 12 nowadays.
not with us.
Yeah. AK, did you lay any money on that Evan Williams Owl of Athens from what is it, like, ridiculous odds all the way into 85 to 40 last week?
No, we risk manage like absolute heroes. It'd be foolish to try that with those early prices. I'd imagine we don't put races up overnight unless the proper races as well. So it's,
to be fair, that was. Although they're, I think the early market, all the 80s and 66s and 50s, that's mythical stuff, isn't it?
I think it was mentioned on some podcasts as well, and I've known as well when I've tried to bet the odd horse as well, and you're really trying to drive one through the floor. That your average price. Someone actually very eloquently, I think it was the Bar Stewards podcast, said that he would have imagined that the average price laid there was about 6 or 7 to 1, and I'd concur with that, even similar to my own stuff.
That's pretty straightforward in these cases. I mean, to be fair, it was 14s and 12s on the show into two, so
it wouldn't take much. It still wouldn't take much.
It still wouldn't take. Obviously, the 14s down to about 3s is probably, very tiny money as well. But what was really interesting there, and someone pointed it out just before we came on air, actually at 9 o'clock. Someone pointed out earlier that the 7 to 2 second favourite in that race, where there was obviously the Owl of Athens gamble was landed. The 7 to 2 favourite for a 7 to 2 second favourite for that race was pulled up quickly before the third, and is out quickly again at Chepstow on Tuesday, or due to be, because I think that will be abandoned at Chepstow tomorrow. But it's quite interesting that the second favourite was pulled up very early, but yet he's still out again 4 days later.
Yes, one to keep an eye on. Some other bits and bobs. Constitution Hill did what he did. TC, I don't know if you have a strong opinion on that. Amsterdam won at Naas on Sunday, but I think Willie pretty much suggesting he's probably not going to go to Cheltenham. They might keep him for Aintree, although there are doubts about, because he's quite keen, whether he'll get 2.5 miles. So I don't know if you backed Amsterdam for the champion hurdle. It doesn't look like he's going to turn up there.
No, he's a very big drifter on the exchange. I think he's 10's biggest price fixed odds, but I think he's out to about 30. Just looking at the other ones here, we've got East India Dock is into 3, second favourite for the Triumph now. That was very impressive. Behind the Lamba, L'Empresse won the Cotswold Chase, but unimpressive. Dancing City was probably the big mover into second favourite for the Browns Advisory, around 4 or 5 to 1, behind stablemates there. And what else have we got? And other newsworthy stuff. Grey Dawning is maybe set to miss Cheltenham. Dan Skelton maybe going for the prize money, talking about going by Kelso to Aintree and bypassing the Gold Cup and Ryanair. So that, if you back that anti-post, you're looking like you've done your money there. Anything else? I'm just looking at here.
That's pretty much it as far as the big Potter's Charm. Obviously, like, I don't know what your view is, TC. Some people giving out that he shouldn't have run in the race, and that they were saying straight to Cheltenham. It was a last minute decision. I mean, personally, the horse, he can't have done his chances any harm for Cheltenham running in the end of January, can he? That's just like.
Willie Tristan Davies has come out today and said he blamed himself. He looked at the entries on Monday morning and thought it was a very easy, grade 2, easy prize money to win. They were talking about going straight to Cheltenham on the back of the Aintree win on Boxing Day, but they were lured in by what they thought was easy prize money. It backfired on them. But yeah, they've got 6 weeks to get it right. But he's gone from being second favourite to 20 to 1 plus. That might be an overreaction. But
total overreaction. I'd have a bit of that. So yeah, okay, we'll wait and see what happens. Right. What's all this about the trainers wanting to get paid for post-race interviews? I have to say, when this popped up on my screen, and I might ask you first, Harry, what your thoughts are on it. There's a picture of Dan Skelton and the 45 chins that he was carrying that day, and this big demanding to get paid for talking to pretty much anybody, any part of the media after races, because the jockeys are getting paid and the trainers feel left out and they are entitled to the money. And the reaction was just like a landslide of, oh my God, do you guys not get it? This is crazy. What's your gut reaction there?
Look, I'm going to use Anthony's favorite word of the day, perception. It just looks terrible, doesn't it? It's not. I think it's more nuanced than people than has been reported, and it appears to be what they're really saying is they want a contribution to be made to trainers generally. Rather, it's not like they're going to get a tenner every time they go and speak to Lydia. But it is not. It's not sensible. But I mean, stepping back a bit again, we talked about this before, but what is the PRA wading into training disputes about? They've got the NTF. We don't know who the trainers are or what they're doing, but we can't just have a situation where you've got a kind of smorgasbord of different bodies that you can choose between as to what your particular views are on any particular subject. I don't get how anyone thinks it's sensible for some of the trainers to have broken off on a couple of issues, but still be NTF members, and have this other organisation. It just, when's it going to stop?
It's like the church, isn't it? There's that many strands of it now.
We're getting into the real NTF and the I can't believe it's not the NTF, and it's
People's Front, the People's Front of Judea, the Judean People's Front.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I thought the NTF statement was the sensible one, which is, look, we don't particularly support this, but it does show you how frustrated trainers are by the way that money's being spent. Everyone's very frustrated about the way that money's being spent. I don't think that this will have won hearts and minds when people are thinking about how money might be spent in the future for trainers, the way it's been handled. It seems to be very bad messaging.
I don't think they read the room at all in this one, Harry. The reaction, Tony, couldn't have been more negative. And then they doubled down on it, and they have since doubled down. And actually, I think this weekend at Sandown, they're saying, look, if an agreement is not reached, they are not going to talk to the media. Now, some of them, to be honest with you, I couldn't give two shites. I've never heard a word from them again. But like, the point and principle of this is that they just don't have a leg to stand on here, I don't think.
Yeah.
Well, we've discussed Peter Saville before. He set up a professional racing association. It's being kind of like coming across as Peter's Revolutionary Army, but he's got nothing to back it up with, has he? It's absolutely preposterous what he's saying. He's saying he's got 170 trainers on his books. Have they been named? No. And Peter Saville's record in this environment is absolutely woeful.
It is woeful.
I remember in 2002, he tried to get newspapers to pay for printing race cards, and
not just pay, Tony, pay top dollar, 300 and something thousand a year, wasn't it?
340,000 a year, and all the newspapers obviously told him to go forth and multiply. Yeah. And so he had to backtrack massively from that. And if you speak to sports editors back in the day, and I spoke to one earlier, and they said that left a lingering kind of like impression on them about racing and how entitled they are to actually charge for printing race cards that to their benefit. And Peter, I can't believe so many people apparently are getting behind Peter Saville here, because someone pointed out to me, and I'll refer to my phone here. Apparently, this is all this is born out of the fact that Peter Saville wants racecourses to pay media payments to them, to his group.
And he's the owner of Plumpton as well.
Yeah, to partially fund it. So Peter Saville makes a big point about he knows how racecourses are run. He knows the profit margins. He knows what they can afford to pay in prize money. And nobody would really kind of argue with him that racecourses should and could pay a lot more than they do. However, I was pointed to this earlier. It was yesterday when I was ringing around a few people about Peter Saville and stuff like that. And someone pointed this out to me. This is Peter Saville as the BHB chairman, as was in a BHB AGM presentation in the 10th of June 2004. It was a long-winded presentation, but one of the things most pertinent here is, and obviously Peter Saville's waging a war against the racecourses to pay more. This is what Peter Saville said in 10th of June 2004. Racecourses in future will be free to decide how much of their own money they want to contribute to the prize fund, rather than being mandated to contribute a certain amount to it. Peter Saville, 10th of June 2004.
He's one of the biggest instigators of the situation we've got now. He's like one of the catalysts of the situation we have now. It's totally bizarre. I actually put up something there on the old tweet machine earlier, just saying that this is a big opportunity for horse racing and how it presents itself to the general public on TV to just massively adapt here. If you listen, when I set up AK Bets, I was an absolute hooer for appearing on podcasts. Like you're trying to get your name out there, you're trying to cross sell, you're trying to make yourself as visible as possible. Like it's free publicity in a way.
Yeah.
It's bizarre that you wouldn't contribute to that on primetime TV and on TV and with an audience and sell yourself and sell how intelligent you are and what you're doing.
There's another angle to this, which I'm not sure anyone's particularly thought about, which is that people generally accept that the racing world is quite so small that journalists have to be quite careful with the questions that they put to trainers because they might not give them interviews in future. If there's if they're contractually bound to give interviews, the questions might change quite dramatically in future. I think they might want to think about that one.
It's also interesting. All this had come from because Peter Saville said, well, the jockeys get paid, so why shouldn't the trainers? Now, I actually looked into this again yesterday, and I said to somebody, where did all this come from? Jockeys getting paid for it. Apparently, Channel 4 were the instigators of this. They used to bung jockeys a few quid on the side for actually giving them an interview, but the jockeys apparently didn't. When they were asked to invoice, they were a bit more reluctant to invoice. So basically, that's when the PJ stepped in. I think it was in 2008 and said, "Well, actually, we won't. If the brown envelopes have gone, what we'll do now is we will do a mass contract whereby anything the jockeys do go into the PGA. The PGA will distribute it to their insurance costs, etc." So that's all well and good, but that's where all this stems from. And apparently the trainers have only just found out about this and they want their slice of the pie. And it is unclear where this trainer's money for the interviews will go to. They're saying quite clearly now, they backtrack a little bit, saying the trainers won't be getting this individually, as the jockeys don't. But it's very unclear where that money will go to.
Well, they're not getting it. I mean, let's be honest. It's not going to happen, is it? In a million years, this is banging. This is the child walking into the room and smashing a steel drum just to try and get some attention. In my view, this is not sensible, and it's all to do with a bigger fight, as far as I can see, between Saville and the race course owners over what's happening with finances generally. This is not going to get people behind him outside of the training.
I think people would agree with the wider the distribution of money changing.
Yes,
and influence. This is just a total ham-fisted way to go about it. But I genuinely press down on revamp the coverage, cut them trainers out, give them no publicity, get more pro punters on, get more on-course bookies on, get lads who do the actual form and have a bet. Get owners on, get owners speaking. It's actually more interesting than if you're wheeling Dan Skelton out as your rep here for this. Like, yeah, no.
It's very interesting today. Rafe Beckett is very, very close to Peter Saville. Used to be one of his owners.
Yeah,
he's distanced himself from Saville on this issue, and he's distanced himself from Dan Skelton's assertion that the vast majority of trainers agree with Saville. So there is a clear disconnect here. And
it's very unfair on the other trainers who appear to have been dragged into this, and indeed on the NTF.
Cut them off. They'll have to back down here. This is just.
But you're only cutting off the ones that are doing it. I think you've got more than half are still perfectly happy to give an interview without
it's
getting
totally,
paid. So it's just really. It's a mess.
The analogy I'll give, right, and listen, I wouldn't advocate anyone behaving like him, right, but I woke up, I think it was this morning, to Donald Trump trying to military plane drop guys back into Colombia. They got told no, and from a position of power, he's just gone tariffs, and then they back down straight away. Like, you need to, from a negotiation point of view, you need to understand and negotiate. If you've got the power, you've got the control, and this is like the direct opposite. This is like the art of the no deal, isn't it? Like it's absolutely woeful tactics, and they'll have to back down. And if they don't, keep them off the
first, you've got to find who it is that is going to stand up to them. Because one of the things about the industry now is it's completely unclear as to who it is that's actually in charge of anything.
Well, let's see if this weekend, if they decide to remain tight-lipped, and if anybody actually cares that they don't hear from the winning trainers. Any update on Rory Campbell? Or no, nothing really, is there?
Still,
Well, there was a piece by Tom Witherow in the Times last Tuesday. He brought it forward a little bit, saying there was new investors coming in after everything was falling apart, it seems. So fair play to Tom. He's been a dog with a bone with this, so he's covered it very well. And Private Eye came into the fore and said the Spotlight Group, who are owners of the Racing Post, had a past business association with Rory Campbell that went tits up, it would seem, from 2019 to 2023 about an in-play betting product. So
Oh.
there's a further Racing Post association there, but other than that, it's gone quiet. But what I would say is, I hope the syndicate who are owed their money or who would like their money back, I think they should regroup, ask for 100% of their money, go down the proper legal route. And the only other 100% thing I would hope comes from this situation is that Rory Campbell doesn't reinvent himself in the betting and punting sphere in the near.
That's got to be an absolute million.
Yeah, it won't happen.
That cannot happen.
I know a few characters who've reinvented themselves in this world, but the only thing I would say is, I'm not talking about you, okay, obviously. The only thing I would say is, and it's complete conjecture, but I wonder if the relative radio silence means that the negotiations might be back on, because the syndicate members have not been backwards and coming forwards when things are not when things aren't don't seem to be going very well. So maybe that accounts for the relative silence.
Yeah. Okay. Nick Goff had a couple of tweets up not in the last few days, really, about his attempts to buy into a share of a horse. And look, we've been talking about obviously the betting side of the financial constraints around punters trying to get bets on and get accounts. But this was interesting, I thought, because he's trying to buy a stake in a horse, basically a share in a horse. And he was asked to provide all sorts of financial income as to the legitimacy of the money that he was going to invest in the horse, where it came from. It wasn't enough to give 3 months bank statements. It wasn't enough that he provided, several different documents to back up, salary and all that kind of stuff. They really kind of went in hard. And again, it leaves a sour taste in the mouth, does it not? I don't know who wants to take the lead on this one, but
yeah, like I just chipping in myself. Obviously, I did a bit of punting for a few years. And similar experiences, I suppose. Maybe not so much as buying horses, but you kind of there's probably going to be. It's really like, I always find that banks just in general just want the status quo. They want lads who are doing 9 to 5s and salary drops into the account on the 26th, and anything outside that they're absolutely flummoxed and they can't deal with anything. Like I always think there's a massive opportunity for some kind of proactive bank who has a bit of intelligence to capture the market there, because there's quite a lot of people that, and probably more so, and will continue to be more so, just live outside that standard norm. Like the amount of people that work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, continues to decline. The world is evolving. Banks aren't evolving. And yeah, it's unfortunate. I think especially when you're pro punting, you're kind of off the grid a little bit. You kind of can't get bets on in your own name, tends to be the situation. You're kind of operating under the radar. And there's probably other, even just it's probably similar to some of the betting stuff as well. But some people just either don't want to provide things, or their circumstances aren't normal. And if we're cutting them out of the game, I'd say that probably would apply to a larger than normal sample out of the whole population. So people who want to buy racehorses, it's probably a lot. And like, horse racing's shouldn't be in the business of turning down people like Nick from participating. Basically, if that is happening, and it's probably happening and has been happening, it's just contributing to the decline essentially, isn't it?
It just seems so unnecessary, and draconian, the measures around, and for buying a horse, like, you wouldn't see this really with anything else. You want to go to buy a car, like, if you got the money, yeah, great, off you go. It's just it's mad.
The things that really interest me about this, it's quite a long thread, but basically it was only $5,000. They asked him for proof of wealth and source of funds.
Yeah.
he said, "Well, I'm not giving you my bank statement because I don't give my bookmakers that." And he offered to give them proof of savings accounts, multiple savings accounts. Initially, they said, "Yes, we'll take that," and then he got an email the next day and said, "No, that's not enough." And if you go to that kind of like point, you just think if that's being replicated across the industry and across other potential owners, I mean, you're going to get people walking away, aren't you? I mean, we have a situation now where we've said it multiple times. There was a case 2 years ago where a guy can rock up to the sales, get 20 million pounds worth of credit, and then walk away from it and say, "No, I've changed my mind. You can, get the horses back and you can resell them." This
Yeah.
is a guy who's willing to give proof of kind of like savings and liquidity
and actually pay.
and pay. And we come back to the Rebecca Menzies episode, 3 or 4 weeks ago. You've got a guy here that's willing to kind of like go out of his way to prove he can afford 5 grand and a multiple of. Yet they're just saying no, go away. Yet people can rock up to Tattersalls, buy horses for 6 figures. So yeah, write that down to credit. I'll pay you within 60 days. It just doesn't add up whatsoever.
No, I mean, anecdotally, I think quite a few people are in Nick's position with Weatherby's, and that they are getting. It may just be that Weatherby's are keeping up with what's happening in regulation generally, and regulation is getting tighter across banking and all industries, really, with financial crime. But I am definitely hearing that people are getting to the end of their tether with some of the requests being made by Weatherby's.
It blows my mind then. I think horses is big. It just economically blows my mind that anybody owns horses these days. Like that's not a good. That's not.
There are very few reasons to do it, aren't there?
It really is. There really aren't that many reasons.
What's the Rachel Reeves story, Harry? I missed this, by the way, guys. Sorry, and I've been looking here for the last 5 minutes to find it. What's the Rachel Reeves? Sorry,
it wasn't. It was something I just forwarded earlier in the week. It was about how the new government wants to get regulators generally to start promoting economic growth, which does seem a slight misunderstanding of what regulators tend to do. But yeah, so it's only interesting in the realms really of affordability checks. I imagine that the Gambling Commission is not going to be at the forefront of their mind when they're talking about that. But it is interesting that someone is finally sort of suggesting that perhaps a line eventually is going to be crossed where the risk of harm and financial crime is outweighed by the economic damage that's being done by overregulation. And I think we'd all, in our little world, suggest affordability checks sail straight across that line. I don't think Rachel Reeves will be getting involved, getting rid of affordability checks in a hurry. But it was an interesting article.
And as aside from this, Anthony, Greg Wood had a piece in The Guardian then about racing's rural vote should not be used in gambling checks battle. I mean, look, I guess from a publicity
careful there, guys. You're going to end up with a cow landing on top of you on Norfolk Broads.
I've got a double-breasted jacket, actually.
Milk from those breasts.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry.
Greg made the point about there was the Fakenham situation last Sunday where all the farmers in the area rocked up and did their protest, and the Racing Post led with it on their front page on the Monday, which was rather bizarre, a rather overtly political statement. And having read the article, it lacked a bit of balance about what the farmers should and shouldn't be paying in tax, etc. But Greg just made it. Greg is he's been one of the best riders in the last kind of like 20 or so years, and held off a little bit, but he came back with a decent article there. I must admit.
They won't be feeding beef burgers to swans who race horses. It's about 12 quid a beef. 12 quid a beef burger at the races these days. You can't do that anymore.
What's wrong with that? The beef burgers contain plenty of fat and have some flow better. What's the problem?
No,
Um,
you cretin. That's the next line,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. TC, do you think the £1 million on offer is enough to lure the Australians, the Japanese horses, far and wide over for the flat season this summer? Is it enough of a carrot, do you think, for maybe some of the big names to come and try their hand at the likes of Royal Ascot or whatever?
No, I don't think so. When you can
A bit
stay
dry.
when you can stay at home and get all the money they've got in their relevant jurisdictions, I think it's a hard sell. The Japanese have been over for Goodwood before, and obviously the Americans have come over and for Royal Ascot and the like, and they're just trying to join up Glorious Goodwood, Royal Ascot, the Juddmonte meeting, and you know, if the £1 million bonuses and the 250 grand for placing in certain races is a positive, then what's not to like. So look, I'm skeptical about this, but good. The Japanese can start home and race for oodles, rather than coming over here.
Exactly.
But
I,
they do think the big meetings over here has got prestige, and the Japanese are becoming a more global racing organisation. So yeah,
British racing is so lucky that people that don't experience British racing on a daily basis think there's anything prestigious about it. Like, no pill, everything about it.
Yeah, that leads us into the next one about the owners. I mean, there's been a lot of owners in the news recently about Brian Drew come out, the part owner of Brave Man's Game. He part owned that with John Dance, but we won't go there. He came out last week and said, "Enough's enough. I can't be owning horses, to the degree I am here. I'm going to own more in Ireland, more in France." To which Paul Nicholls owners, Jed Mason, the like, came out and said, well, actually, and Max McNeil said, no, there is a prestige attached to British racing that
yeah.
I want my horses trained here. Obviously, there's a logistical, effort here as well, and obviously, you want to go and see your horses relatively nearby. But that, I think that kind of line from Max McNeil and Jed Mason only gets you so far when you're racing for a relative pistance. I don't think Irish prize money is particularly good, but the French angle is a massive draw, isn't it? And the owners have been in the news across the board. This week we got Steve Parkin in a dispute with Ballahane Stud. And you got Keir Rabson actually buying Parkin, looking to buy Parkin's one of Parkin's studs as well. So, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of angst from owners in this country about the prize money and how they're going to look to get out of it. And hopefully they don't. Hopefully we can keep them, but it's a hard sell at the moment.
It is a hard sell. I don't know if the reaction is appropriate. I don't know if enough countermeasures have been taken here to try and persuade people in or to try and keep them. It just seems like, oh well, that owner's gone and that's it. Like, Harry, it's kind of almost we're resigned to this happening.
It is astonishing. I think if things go as badly as they might, people will look back on this and just go, "What? Why wasn't everyone just talking about increasing prize money? Why was any other discussion, really part of this? It all leads back from prize money. And yes, it's a part of the conversation, but it's not enough of it. It's not emphasized enough at the moment.
Yeah, no, totally agree. We'll keep an eye on that, obviously. Right. One more before we go to our questions, listener questions, and quite a few this week as well. What was the story about 3 arrested on suspicion of cheating offences? Harry, again, it's our little legal eye on the watch here. What's this about?
Just saw this today. What's interesting about it is it's a gambling commission led prosecution. Make of that what you will, of 3 people who appear to have been involved in throwing a boxing match. That's rare in my experience for the Gambling Commission, and it's I think it's Section 43 or whatever it is, the Gambling Act, cheating, which again is a rare offence. But it does, I guess, open up the prospect of a more muscular regulator getting involved in sports and the underlying contests, and perhaps even one day looking at things like handicapping and stopping and that kind of thing. I think we're a long way from Andrew Rhodes marching down to wherever and picking up trainers. But yeah, it was an interesting one with very little detail. It's been handed over to the police, and we'll, hopefully at some point find out what happens.
Would you have to pay those trainers to speak, or would they be obliged to?
We'll wait and see. Adam Swan says, if you ran a race course and were planning on building works, what do you do in the 4 to 5 months if you weren't racing? I ask as Cheltenham had no bar facilities in the Tats yesterday. They were refurbishing the 2 bars and had closed the sales ring as well. Not a good look, is it? I don't know.
This is to do with pictures on ITV Racing on Saturday, and I was sent some pictures from people at the track as well, just saying it's absolutely dead here. And some of the ITV pictures, it was just a wasteland. But apparently the Tats area was closed off, and all the bars and restaurants and foods were shut while they refurbished it with a view to the festival, which leads to the question: if you're gonna do that at Cheltenham Trials Day, why didn't you do it after the final meeting in April, between April and October? So it was a weird one because
I heard some rumblings. There's a knock-on effect for everybody. I think when that happens, it's probably not great communication, not great timing. I heard some stories of on-course bookmakers pitching up in Tats and then just leaving basically after the racing started, basically just because there's
so they were in the area where there were no bars, no food outlets, and they weren't told.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
I was told.
What is it like? It's just if that is the case, and I can't confirm whether it is or not. It's just there's such bad will and lack of trust and lack of belief in competence. I think just permeates, doesn't it? It's not good.
Cheltenham must have been worried because I sent through a group about annual members were given basically license to invite 2 people or their friends and family or whatever free of charge for Cheltenham.
Attendances are up.
Well, and like I said, and ITV were giving out attendances of 20,000 plus, and I've had that confirmed today by somebody, but quite bizarrely, well, not bizarrely. When I asked about the attendance figures for Saturday, which he confirmed were £20,000, 20,000 plus, he actually added to me about Cheltenham Festival figures. Now, apparently, the Cheltenham Festival attendance figures for 2024 were poor. Sorry, and they were really worried about those. I'm led to believe after a meeting today. They are, am I allowed to swear? Yeah, they are worried as fuck about the pre-sales for the festival tickets in 2025 coming up in 6 weeks or under 9 months in Cheltenham Festival.
They should get the guys from the Fakenham tractors there to get everyone out of the parking at the end of it. That would get attendances up.
But no, they'll probably just block it like London Light, don't they? But they won't get jail for 4 years like the Just Stop Oil people. We won't go there.
Yeah,
no. But it probably needs.
The point I'm trying to make is that Cheltenham are worried about the attendance figures, especially for the festival as well. So hopefully it will pick up in the next 6 weeks. But like I said, they are worried about the pre-sales going into the final throes of the Cheltenham Festival.
Okay, good stuff. We've had a few questions on the trainers, so I'll just fly through a couple of them. Is there any other sport where participants think they warrant payment for talking to the media when racing should be trying to make itself as accessible and appealing as possible? That's from Wind Operations. David Robert Beale says apparently some trainers not sure how many will only give interviews if they're paid a fee. Dave Bradshaw, a build on this one. As Barney is no longer with us, would any trainer actually be worth paying to hear? If so, who? Look, I guess it depends on the horse and the story and what kind of mood they're in and stuff. I mean, they can be very good.
You cover a lot of other sports. Do any other sports individuals get paid for interviews?
Well, if you look at the Premier League, they're contractually bound because of Sky's deal that they must talk like a man of the match, another player, a manager. They must talk after the game to say Sky Sports or BT. It's in the contract. Rugby wise, yeah, it is in the contract as well, and then post match as well. They're obliged to provide a certain number of players for the media, including captain as well. So like there are rules depending on the sport.
But that's a totally different structure
It is. They're totally obliged,
of the
aren't
sport
they?
itself. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
part of they
Yeah.
are part of the Premier League, whereas the trainers are, you're not doing, there isn't a deal with the NTF and the broadcaster.
Yeah, it's another thing
It's just
about
different structure.
as was pointed out to me, it's not just the interviews. I mean, the jockeys do get paid as well for the likes of the jockey cams, the going into stewards inquiries and stuff like that. The PGA have a deal with the rights holder about that as well. So it's not a matter of, oh, we pay them for interviews. There is a lot of add-ons and knock-ons as well that the trainers don't.
I've said it before. Struthers, he's a shrewdy, isn't he? He's a little shrewdy. He's old Struthers. I just wonder. I wonder aloud. Do you think any of this is kind of a knock-on effect of full gallop, or am I just shit stirring there? Do you think any of this?
Yeah,
Any of these conversations are off the back of just that deal, and then people talking about money going into jockeys and things like that, and then trainers taking.
What do you think? Are you suggesting that we're going to start seeing kind of like rap albums coming from various members of the racing fraternity? They're now celebrities having been attached to ITV's Full Gallop.
I know what Angie's going. It is absolutely tailor-made. Oh, this is a line in February the 1st. Sandown Saturday is a line in the sand. If you don't pay us, trainers aren't gonna give interviews. Well, 170 of the 520 or whatever, if the 170 even exist. It's good TV, even if it's not born in reality, isn't it?
Do you think they'll actually cover the? I mean, can you imagine? You're trying to sell racing to a non-racing crowd. Let's start covering political spats between the SPA or whatever they're called and the broadcasters. I mean that. It's bad, Tony, but it's not that bad, surely.
Revolutionary Army.
There we go. Harry, you can take this. What's the significance of? We dealt with that, noting the explanation. WV Horse and Cricket says, interested to hear AK's thoughts on the pitches at tracks in Ireland he owns last week. For Hugh and AK, which Irish race courses would they recommend as must-goes and those to avoid? Well, I mean, like they all have their different charms, I suppose. There's none that I'd say definitely don't go there. Like you don't like Leopardstown when it gets too busy and it's not, or the Curragh obviously is not. I wouldn't be rushing to go to the Curragh.
Well, what's your favourite track, Hugh, in Ireland?
Favorite track. I think Punchestown really. I just on a busy day in April at the end of the season, like it's brilliant. It's great.
On the contrary, Leopardstown's real chalk and cheese. I think my favourite meetings are at Leopardstown, and some of the quiet ones are at Leopardstown as well. It's kind of I think they've 23 fixtures this year, and half of them will be very, very good, and 5 of them will be moderate, and 5 of them will be really poor. The really, really good ones, like honestly, DRF is coming up this weekend. It's the best. I think it's the best meeting in the whole year. There's no other meeting I'd rather go to out of absolutely everything. And then every track has got its quirks and charms. Listow, the Killaneys, Laytown is a cracking day if you're doing one day. DRF is off the charts. I think it's really, really good.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. And the quality of racing as well is just brilliant. Sando says, Owl of Athens, 80s into 85 to 40. Biggest punt AK has suffered on track as a bookie and the biggest best he has been a part of as a punter. Biggest on both?
What was the question? Sorry.
What's the biggest punt you've suffered on track as a bookie? Can you remember?
Nothing too standard. I remember losing quite a lot of money early on a Matthew J. Smith horse at Dundalk. Early on, when we were probably blind to when the money's down. Be careful.
Yeah.
Joe Smith. And then Noel C. Kelly, had a winner today. It was actually bet in the ring again at Punchestown. Noel C. Kelly, and it's kind of like Charles Burns-esque, should we say? It's SP can have no. If you look at the price of Noel C. Kelly's winner today at Punchestown, it's 9-4 out to 5s, 9-2 maybe, and you might think they have a bet maybe in that yard, and if they're drifting, stay away from them. If they're short, and they absolutely smashed into that on the off in the ring, and it probably wasn't reflected in the SP. Certain trainers you'd be if you're getting asked lumps, you probably want to get out of the way of them and try and you probably want to be on them rather than laying them. To be honest with you, what was the other bit of it? Was there another?
Just the best bet you've been part of as a punter, briefly.
Whoa, fucking hell! There's been probably quite a few. One of my most enjoyable ones was when you could actually get money on the machines in shops. A golf each way double top countries. It was Annabelle Lahiri, top Asian in some event, and I had this is very niche now. Sorry,
Yeah.
and then there was
try that with you now.
there was a European Tour event with like a 40-1 shot as well that I bet like top Spaniard or something like that. Maybe I don't know who it was. Might have been Alejandro Del Rey or somebody like that.
Very good.
Yeah, landed the double and got an absolute.
If I was a bookmaker, I'd ask you for the passport of the top Spaniard just to make sure he was indeed a Spaniard.
Who's that?
And then the last question, John Sibelius. If Langer Down Skeleton can't magic up horses out of nowhere, where does that leave the small trainers who rely on the crumbs from the table? Is the supply drying up? Who out there is sourcing the good ones? Anyone want to take that?
Well, if you could always row in with Peter Saville.
Yes, there you go. There you go. Good stuff. On that bombshell, we will leave it. My thanks to TC, to Harry, and to AK. Download the AK Bets app as well, and look for the tab at the top for all the best offers, top prices on all the big sporting events. Okay, enjoy your week, folks, and we will talk to you next week. Good luck.